And well, it's wonderful because we've got a special guest today. I'm just going to say, Bob, tell the viewers a little bit about your background, Bob, and how you ended up to come here with the UK column.
Right, where do we begin? I stuck my head above the parapet in February of 2020 when we started to hear about this deadly strain of the flu coming across the waters to the UK, and and I've been voicing my opinion about that and many other topics ever since. The reason I'm here today is just coincidentally, I happened to be on holiday in Cornwall. 2 days before I left, I got a phone call from UK Column News, and here I am.
So you've got some friends that you originally met in Egypt.
Yeah, that was 23 years ago, and we've been the best of buddies ever since. So now we're sort of tied to Cornishmen.
Yeah. And professionally, you worked as a driving instructor, or you still do?
I still do, yeah. I've been a driving instructor 23 years again. I was just beginning my driving instruction career when I met these guys, these Cornish fellas. 23 years as a driving instructor. I have a couple of guys, 4 people working under my banner, if you like. And things are going okay, but I'm reaching that point now where I'd like to
ease off a bit,
slow down a little bit. Yeah.
And I've heard a few stories about driving lessons and driving instructors, that the COVID lockdown caused big problems and backlogs with the exams and.
Yeah, it did.
Right.
It did. I've had my own personal battle with the mask mandates. I've never been one for complying, if you like. I've always had my own mind. The DVSA brought in rules about having to wear masks on test. Okay, I can't really do a lot about that. But then they also started to bring in mandates about wearing masks on lessons, which is something I flat refused to do. So then that started to cause a little bit of a storm when you arrived at test centres and what have you. I ended up having a run-in with one particular examiner who was trying to force his will onto me, I suppose. And unfortunately, that's been an ongoing thing for a while.
So how is the industry now? Is it? I'll call it an industry, whatever the professional term is. But has it recovered from all of that hassle?
No. During the lockdown period, we ended up going back. It was about 400,000 tests behind.
Wow.
It was a huge amount. And even now, it still hasn't caught up. You now have, I had a pupil contact me this week. She couldn't get a test until, that was July or August, something like that, just off from memory. So yeah, there's still a huge backlog. I couldn't give you numbers on the amount waiting, but it's massive. It's absolutely huge. And I personally, looking into the deeper agenda with 2030 and what have you, with their plans to remove all private vehicle ownership by 2030, as the DVSA is a government organisation, who knows, is this linked?
Yeah. Well, it's one of those interesting coincidences, isn't it? It's a bit too good.
There's been a lot of those over the years.
Absolutely. So you've been up to something. Tell us what you've been doing. What produced that initial contact?
Right. What it was is this whole thing stems from Stand in the Park.
All right.
Okay. Stand in the Park set up in Australia in 2020. And we set our own one up in Thetford in early 21. And
just for people who might be overseas, where's Thetford?
Thetford is in Norfolk in England. A small market town. A lot of history around there. Thomas Paine, the guy that got the anti-slavery movement going, was born there. yeah, quite an important. It was an important town.
Right. Rural sort of area.
Yeah, rural, but growing consistently. There was a big influx from London in the late 60s, early 70s, like with the London overspill, which is how my family came to be there. So yeah, there's a lot of industry there as well.
Right.
Now.
Yeah, great. Sorry, I've interrupted you on
No,
that
that's
one.
fine.
So what have you been doing then?
So yeah, so us tin hatters, us conspiracy theorists, used to meet up by the river next to the Captain Mainwaring statue, and exchange information. What did you find out this week? What's been going on? Da 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 da. Anyway, in the Eastern Daily Press, a local newspaper to Norfolk, there was an article came up that Thetford had been earmarked as a possible candidate for 15-minute zones, along with Rackheath and another town close by. And so this was quite a bombshell because nobody had, there was no consultations with the public. Nobody knew anything about it. The first we knew was this little article in the Eastern Daily Press. So off we went to our stand in the park and chat. That was the main conversation. Then one of our group, who wants to remain nameless, she said, "Why don't we put some leaflets out and let the people know the county council's intention or proposed intention?" And then she said, "Why don't we say there's going to be a council meeting about it?" Now, there was no council meeting about it. The council meeting coming up was going to be around the allotments. They want to close the allotments and do whatever they want to do with it, which is another story. But anyway, so we all put a few quid in and got 5,000 leaflets printed up explaining what the 15-minute zones meant. Connected it to what's going on in Oxford and the restrictions there, and we put these 5,000 leaflets out through the town. What happened after that was a bit of a shock, because we was in those of us that had been involved in handing the leaflets out and what have you. We was in the pub over the road in the lead up to this council meeting. And we was, okay, right, well, we better get over there now. We couldn't get in the place. Around 200 people had turned up off the back of these leaflets. Right. And yeah, we couldn't get in.
And what sort of people? I'm always interested in this. Was it a particular age group or? It
was wide ranging. Yeah, so all age groups. I know it sounds, but it was super posh to really working class. There was
a mix.
The demographic was huge.
Yeah.
Some people had come in from out of town because they'd heard about the leaflet being spread. So yeah, it was quite something else. So anyway, as you can imagine, in the council meeting there was panic in the ranks.
Yeah.
One of the councillors, he won't mind me mentioning his name, Mark Taylor, great guy. He's totally on board with everything that's going on. He is good friends with the owner of the Thomas Paine Hotel. And he contacted him and said, "Look, we've been overrun with people at this council meeting. Can we use your hotel to carry out this meeting?"
Well, right.
We all ended up trooping up the road to the Thomas Paine Hotel, which now it's quite funny actually. In the mainstream, it said that we marched on the council. We didn't march on the council. We strolled up to the Thomas Paine Hotel.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, the Mayor, Jane James, stood on a chair at the front and told us exactly how this meeting was going to be conducted, which raised a laugh amongst the 200 that had accumulated.
Why? Because it was a controlling thing.
Yeah, and the control was soon gone.
Right.
So anyway, So we've all got in there, and Mike Ball, Mike Ball became our spokesman, if you like, when we was arranging what we was going to do. It was basically, well, who's gonna speak? We can't all speak, and he said, well, I'll do it, and that's how he became the front man for the video that actually went out and went viral.
Right.
Basically telling Jane James that how dare she put her yes vote to such a scheme without prior consultation, and he does not need, and we do not need, somebody to make that decision for us.
Right. So, keeping it all really measured, was she shocked at the response from the public in that room?
Extremely.
Right.
Yeah. As time went on, and the mood was, the mood never got out of control. I think that was a real strong point. The points were good, the points were valid, and everybody kept calm. And over time, you could see the dejection coming across her face.
Right, because she putting words in your mouth, because she felt there was more to it than she anticipated.
Yeah. That was a huge part of it, actually, because there was a lot of people in that room that had already researched what was going on, and I honestly believe that she had no idea of the depth of the vote that she'd placed.
Right.
What
she was really dealing with.
Yes.
She'd gone along with it. She was for it. She thought she knew what it was all about.
Yeah, that's it. It was quite funny, actually. Mark Taylor actually said in the initial meeting that they had followed the party whip. Jane James is a Tory, and it was just suggested that they'd followed the party whip.
Right. Just to interject here, I find this point really interesting because a couple of days ago I was able to do an interview with an MP, and he expressed to me frustration that other MPs would not engage in a whole range of topics. And when I said, why is this? His response was, well, basically it's control within the party, which is what the whip system's about. Now, what I'd just like to emphasise for the audience, and particularly people overseas, we're talking about a town council here.
Yeah.
So this is I'm not sure what the population is of...
It's about 30,000.
Okay, so we've got a town council for 30,000 people, but even at that very localised level, party politics are being run on the whip system.
Yeah. Jane James is a county councillor as well.
Yeah.
So,
right.
But she just happens to be our mayor.
But she was being honest the truth came out.
Yeah, it was quite funny actually that she did state while she was speaking that if there had been any restrictions or the restrictions that we were bringing up, then she would absolutely not be in favour of such restrictions.
Right. So,
but like I say, I think that was a bit of a shock to her.
So if we paint a little picture for people who haven't seen any of the video clips, and what we'll do for this interview is we'll put a couple of clips in for people to see.
Yeah.
But if we paint a little picture, how did the additional information come across in that meeting? What was presented at the meeting which you felt was good factual evidence as to what this was really about? Right.
Yeah. I'll put in that just for you so that your viewers know where to go. LSB Film Productions were the guys there that actually filmed the meeting, so they can get that on YouTube and then can go and look at the series that's now building up. But I think the big thing was that the councillors had no knowledge at all, or so they say. And there was one guy in particular, I don't know who he was, but he actually started to go through the build-up to how 15-minute zones came about. and he started to talk about the Club of Rome and things like that. And I could have kissed him, actually.
Okay, that would have put a different spin on the event.
Yeah,
so,
and so the response from the councillors were, well, we've got some bedtime reading to go and do,
right,
because they obviously don't know as much as we do.
Yeah.
So that was good. That was good in that respect.
Right. Okay. So, how long were you in there? Simple question. Do you reckon?
An hour maximum.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, what's your view on what you achieved then in that hour?
Right. It led to something that has so we hear, has never happened before. Mark Taylor, the councillor, suggested we try and call an emergency county council meeting.
Right.
And lo and behold, up came the plans for an emergency county council meeting, which we held last week.
Okay. So tell us about that then. Where was that? Is it council offices? Did you manage to?
Right. That ended up in the Carnegie Rooms in Thetford.
Right.
A bigger venue, 300 ticket event. They were all free tickets. And it basically, the way we set it up was, the county council arranged the venue and the way it was going to be formatted, and we ended up with four county councillors on one side of the stage, 4 of us on the other side, and a lectern in the audience so that people could come and throw their questions.
Right. I've got to say that to me seems a pretty accommodating response from the county council. I can imagine some county councils would have just put the stone wall up and tried to palm you off and keep you away. So I think we can give them some credit for actually agreeing to that.
Absolutely,
because for sorry, did you say 4 councillors?
There was 2. There was the 2 local county councillors, and then 2 that had come from higher up in Norfolk.
I could imagine for those councillors to sit on the stage and face what they probably in their heads thought was quite a hostile audience. I think that takes some courage. I think we've got to recognise this, because if we've got councils making bad decisions, it's no good painting all the councillors as bad. We've got to give some praise where it's due, I think. But that's just my opinion. You might have seen it differently.
No, it's like you say, it was great that they've allowed us the platform to question publicly. Again, LSB Film Productions filmed the whole event, and amongst other people that turned up, ITV turned up, Rebel News.
Right.
There was a lady called Laura Nina. She does Facebook lives, and she came down and covered it as well. So there was a hell of a lot of publicity went with it.
Okay. All right. So, what came out of that debate then? Do you think the key points about what the real agenda is, did that come across?
Right. To sort of lay the way, if you like. Second report that came out in the Eastern Daily Press after the initial council takeover, if you like. There was a councillor called Lana Hempsell. She then she was interviewed and stated in the Eastern Daily Press that she had come up with the idea of 15-minute zones, 20-minute zones. Her thing was, because she's registered blind herself, and she thought it would be a great idea to instigate such a scheme to help other disabled people. So to those of us that know where 20-minute zones and 15-minute zones come from, that was quite laughable. So Lana Hempsell was up there on the stage with us.
Right.
And we allowed her to say her bit, and so then the next question, that was from myself, was, you have now reiterated that the 15-minute zone idea came from yourself. How proud are you that your idea has gone worldwide?
Right.
from that point onwards, it was sad and laughable at the same time, because from that point onwards, she just tried to convince us endlessly that yes, this idea was hers.
Yeah.
I don't know why. There was a lot of people in that room that had a full understanding of geopolitics and corporate infiltration into government, and the fact that the 15-minute zones have come from way higher than the government's pay grade.
Yeah. And internationally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is, you know, and off the back of, I mean, I'll add that off the back of these videos that are going out now, we're being contacted worldwide. It's gone viral.
Yeah.
And it's empowering a lot of people to take on their governments themselves, the councils themselves.
Right, okay, just because I got things flicking through my head. So just, you mentioned the media there. Let's focus on that a bit. So what sort of reports did the media make after that event?
Rebel news, straight up, straight down.
Yeah.
What happened is what got reported. ITV, it really surprised me that they didn't poo-poo us as much as we thought they were going to.
You didn't get branded as some form?
No, that was a real surprise. Although what did make me laugh was that they tried to debunk us with fact checkers.
Right. So who did they use? Our old friend Full Fact?
That's it, Reuters, and you know, the usual
faux fact, as we prefer to call them.
That's it, the usual suspects, which is laughable. And, you know.
Right. So the product that they produced in trying to debunk it,
that was really was it. Right. That really was it. They interviewed a couple of people in the town, and there were very soft answers, I would say. They didn't actually interview anybody that had full knowledge of what was going on. But yeah, it was quite a tame report in the end.
Yeah. Right. Okay. And so that's the media. What was the ultimate response from the council then? So that they set up this emergency meeting, and there'd been good attendance at it. What then happened in the council?
So, well, we had myself, Jeff Mealing, very knowledgeable guy. We had Brian from Peacekeepers there that would help us should we need almost like legal advice, if you like. Very, very knowledgeable on equity and what have you. And Mike Ball was there, very eloquent. And what came from the county council's table never really gave us any answers, because what we had was four people on the county council table basically saying to us, this isn't going to happen, it's just an idea. We've got no intention of restrictions, no intention of ANPR cameras, and so on and so on and so on. But in essence, that acknowledgement doesn't carry any weight whatsoever, because they're just words. And although yes, they're on film saying it, at some point these people are going to move on, and the next lot are going to come in.
Yeah.
And
the agenda comes in a step at a time, doesn't it? It's a little piece. It's a creeping agenda that comes in.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. Yeah. Like, you know, the analogy used again and again is the boiling the frog. Yeah, isn't it? Yeah. So, but what we're trying to do in Thetford is we're trying to nip this in the bud before it gathers any momentum. Yeah. And certainly wake people up to at least go and research and investigate for themselves. Yeah.
And do you think you've had success with that?
Certainly.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's you're getting messages now from, certainly on a personal view, on a personal front, I'm now being contacted by people that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, thought I was nuts.
Yeah, I've got to say welcome to the club on that one. And I think I've said this before, but my favourite or the main time where people will reapproach me is when I'm dog walking. The best one ever was a man I was quite friendly with at one stage, but particularly when I was doing my work to expose the political charity Common Purpose, he'd distanced himself. But I hadn't seen him for a very long time, and suddenly he was there walking a dog as well, and a bit of polite opening conversation, and then he suddenly said to me, do you know, there's stuff that you told me all those years ago that I now understand. And it was very nice because, you know, he was conceding something, but yeah, it happens. It happens.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's really nice to well, like they say, what's the difference between the difference between a conspiracy theory and conspiracy fact? About 6 months.
Yes.
It's so true.
Yeah, and I'm going to add to that there are politicians who are acknowledging that now. They're saying that isn't it interesting, stuff that we saw being talked about as if it was conspiracy theory is now proving to be fact. And I am seeing these sorts of reports from people in political circles, usually coming out on Twitter. So you don't see it in any form of press announcement, but you can see it on Twitter pages, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So response from local people. The council's been quietly defensive. I think they're hoping it's going to go into the long grass.
Yeah. On the night, the meeting didn't go exactly how we'd planned. We had a hell of a lot of, let's call it ammunition. The guys, peacekeepers, and Mike Ball's contacts that have just come about in the last month have done a hell of a lot of research.
Right.
And we had a hell of a lot of ammunition to throw at the councillors should they not at least acknowledge that.
You were talking sense?
Yes. Yeah. So in that respect, we still have this ammunition in our back pocket.
Yeah.
Our powder's still dry, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that's left in the background for now, and I'm not going to talk about that because it is ammunition.
Okay. So what are you hoping? What are you hoping that the council's going to do now?
Ideally, what we would like them to do, as Mike Ball said when he spoke to them, he wants it now put in writing and rubber stamped and wet signatured.
Yeah.
And he wants that sent to every resident of Thetford. But I think the best we'll get is that this letter acknowledging that there will be no restrictions ever in the future will go to at least the town council. Yeah,
this makes sense to me because, of course, as you said, words are cheap. But if you get something written down, that they may attempt to go 180 degrees or go in a different direction from what they've written in a letter, but it's a lot more difficult if it's on paper than if it's just been said verbally at a meeting.
Yeah, and that was something that Tom McCabe, I believe his name was, quite high up in the council. He was there. And he said, I can absolutely promise you that this won't happen, it will never happen. But almost like, but who knows? Yeah. And that you can imagine the audience then.
Yeah. And of course we come back to this fact that if the policy was at least enforced by the whip system, then something is still sitting in the background, isn't it?
Yeah.
Tory Central Office knows full well that there is an agenda to unleash this stuff.
Yeah. Well, we do know that regardless of what the council says or what they send to us, this will continue to be rolled out by the powers above.
Yeah.
I think the whole idea behind us doing what we're doing is to at least get people to realise that they are more powerful than they believe they are. This whole thing is so ludicrous that eventually it will fail. But I think people need to wake up en masse and at least just say no.
Yeah.
If people realise the strength they have in that one word, Just say no and stand and say, I'm not going to do what you're asking me to do.
Yeah.
That's the whole idea behind this.
Yeah.
We know they're going to continue and try and roll it out, but it just needs a wake-up call.
It's all about psychology, this, isn't it? Because a lot of people find it very difficult to certainly stand up in public and ask a question. So when there's an opportunity to challenge even a parish councillor, I was a parish councillor for a while, and I can see people, I remember seeing people coming into meetings and they had something on their mind, it was really important, but that bit of standing up in front of a few other people and putting the question across, they could find it difficult. So to say something in public, to challenge is tricky, and then people are very, what's the word, subservient. They think that if somebody's got a title, and the moment it gets to MP, that this person's got to be treated as if they're some sort of godlike person, when the reverse is true, isn't it? The MP should be serving the people.
Yeah, that was something that was pointed out at the initial meeting.
Right.
That, remember, you are public servants.
Yeah.
And
yeah, they didn't like that too much.
No, not at all. And it's quite. I want to touch on something you said just a second ago. Is about standing up publicly and speaking. It's really important for people to realise that people like myself and Jeff and Mike are only. Mike's done a lot of work. Mike hasn't worked for a month.
Right.
Because he's
doing
so
this.
deep into this.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that us three and others are merely the voice to get the information out. What's actually happened is it's the people in the background, like the lady who came up with the idea of the leaflets. If she hadn't come up with that idea and arranged the leaflets and arranged where we were going to put them and when, and coordinate it all, none of this would have happened.
Yeah.
So it's really important to remember that even if you're right in the background and all you're doing is the odd Facebook post or the odd this or the odd that, it doesn't matter. As long as you're there doing something, it will gather momentum.
Yeah, this is a really good point. I mean, UK Column has been saying for a while that what's needed is a lot of people doing a little instead of a lot of people, working flat out to do it. Yeah. And simple things can make a difference. Often when you don't know, I'm telling a few little stories here, but I think I'm allowed to. In the early days, when I was following this organisation, Common Purpose, I was interested that it was working in Plymouth City Council, and I wrote quite a few letters into the council asking them questions about what they were doing and why Common Purpose was there and how much they were spending on it. Now, some of them I did under the Freedom of Information Act, but I did other letters and I never got any responses. And many years later, I was talking to a friend of mine who had been a councillor in Plymouth City Council at one point, and I said to him, God, all those hours I wasted on those letters. And he looked at me and he went quite quiet and he said, what do you mean wasted? And I said, well, I spent hours writing some of those letters and I sent them in and I never got a single response. And he looked at me and he said, Brian, let me tell you that I was there at the time, and every time one of your letters came into the council, they wet themselves. That's what he said. And I've never forgotten that, because it explains the fact you do something simple, you don't see any immediate result, but actually taking that effort or making that action makes something happen in the future that can be a lot bigger than you expected. So just anecdotal story there.
Yeah, that leads me beautifully on to my own story. When they announced they were going to start jabbing kids, the protest numbers in London swelled rapidly, didn't they?
Yes.
You're talking 2-3 million, however many it was. And was coming along the embankment, and there was this little old lady walking alongside me, and she was struggling, really struggling. And I said to her, do you need a hand? And she said, no, I'm okay, I'll carry on. And she started to tell me about how she'd taken one shot, felt bad. The doctor said, take another one, you'll feel better. She took another one, felt worse. And anyway, we was chatting. And just as we was chatting, we came round and we was facing Westminster and facing the Parliament buildings. And she said to me, she said, the Stand in the Park group that I now go to, she said, I know civil servants now that work in there.
Right.
She said, you must promise me that you will carry on doing this. She said, because they are pooping themselves. I'm trying to watch my language.
Yeah, of course. It's UK culture.
Yeah. And she said, you must promise me that you'll carry on with this. She said, because there's people in that building that are bricking it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because the bricking it is not the results of threats and intimidation. It's simply starting to understand that people are looking at them and they're asking questions. It's they do a job which they do out of sight of the public, and they can do what they like because nobody can see. When they understand the public's actually watching them, that's very scary.
Yeah. It's people power, power in numbers. Yeah, which leads me on to what happened in between the first council meeting and the second council meeting.
Okay, yeah.
Us tin hatters thought, right, how can we really take this on head on? The local elections are coming up. So we had a couple of meetings where we discussed running for council, trying to take over the council seats so that we could bring in a system of bottom-up decision making instead of top-down. Yeah. So we discussed joining the Heritage Party, Freedom Alliance.
Vote Freedom would be the other one.
Reform, you know, they all went through. And on a personal base, I couldn't bring myself to join any kind of political party because you're still working from the top down. There's still orders and a badge attached to you. So at one of these meetings, I spat my dummy out and insisted that the only thing I would ever do was go independent.
Yeah. And
stand for what you truly believe in. And anyway, I left about 5 minutes later, and then I messaged Mark Taylor the next morning and reiterated why. And it goes back to when I was a kid and what have you, but that's why. And he said, he said, after you left, we all agreed that independence the way.
Right.
So now, what we've done through the hard work of Mark Taylor and Mike Bull and what have you is we now have 14 town councillors. Sorry, I'll say that again. So what we now have is we put our applications in. Off the back of the applications being accepted, we now have 14 town councillors and 10 district councillors from our Stand in the Park group.
Wow.
That are running as independents.
Right.
It's huge.
That's really exceptional. And all that's happened in what sort of time frame?
Within a month.
Wow.
Yeah, and we had to work very, very quickly because the elections are the 4th of May. And we had a deadline of the 4th of April to get all the paperwork in, get people to nominate us, and So, but it's amazing.
Bob, has that happened as a result of a few people driving it, or has it happened as a sort of?
No, it's. I did a very small speech on the night of the second council meeting, and basically it was around the fact that none of us had ever envisaged that we would ever need to do this.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like none of it. We've all been pushed into a corner to the point where we've had to say, right, let's take this head on.
Yeah.
The discussions that went on. Yes, there's a handful of us that have said straight up, right, come on, let's go for this.
Yeah.
There are other people that have said they're really nervous about doing it, but they'll do it. They're going to do it because of what goes on in there. It's in the gut, it's in the stomach that you need to at some point stand up and cross that line in the sand, and that's what it's based around.
Yeah, no, this is brilliant, because this will also be concentrating the attention of the council.
Yeah.
Because a direct challenge through the democratic system, with all its faults, when a challenge comes in through the system that they're used to working under, this is another big, big thing. Yeah,
I mean, another big thing that we've said that we will do is, because we're doing this because it's just the right thing to do. We have said that town councillors don't get paid.
No.
District councillors get their fees and their expenses and so on and so on. And what we've said from the outset is that we will not take that money. Any money that is awarded to us will go into a fund for the town, so that if anybody's on their uppers, like recently there was a couple of house fires, stuff like that, that fund will be there to help those people in the town that need help.
This is great, isn't it? Because what's actually starting to happen is that the communities is starting to look after itself, which is the way it should be. You could almost argue that the rise of the politicised, the party political town councils and district councils and county councils, it's the politicisation of those councils, which means that they no longer act for the communities that they're supposed to serve.
Absolutely.
So I've talked about this several times recently, and I think it's a critical thing. My belief is that political parties should be banned.
Yes.
But I've done some interviews with people who have formed political parties to challenge what's happening, and I'm happy to say to them, I admire what you're doing. I hope you get people elected because you're doing it for the right reason. But then I've said, at least to a couple of them, I hope that if you ever get into Parliament, one of the things you'll do is ban political parties, right? And that's produced a bit of laughter. But of course, I spoke to Jonathan Tilt a couple of days ago, and he's with Vote Freedom, and what they're saying is that people should stand as independents, but to give them some supporting background, we come together in order to help anybody that wants to stand. And also, they've got 8 points which they think any reasonable person must be able to say, well, yeah, we broadly agree with that. So on one hand, you could say they're independent, but I think that's a little bit unkind. All they're trying to do is say, if people are coming on board as independents, that at least you know that they've got a package of things they agree in, which I thought was an interesting compromise.
Yeah.
But for anybody listening to me talk now, don't get me wrong. If you're trying to challenge the existing party political system, I'm all for that. But I think this is interesting, isn't it? The power of the independent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is.
Right. So, clock watching a little bit. You wrote some points down for yourself. Do you think, have you covered everything you'd like to?
Let's have a look.
To cover, because
something else that's going on just down the road from me, Bury St Edmunds. Bury St Edmunds is very sleepy, and they're not really in tune with what might happen next.
Yeah.
So one of the guys in Bury St Edmunds is now trying to arrange contact with groups in Ipswich, Colchester, Cambridge, and so on to get rallies going now.
Yeah.
And outreach, leaflets, speeches,
this is good,
and what have you, to really try and wake people up in a grander scale in Suffolk.
Right.
Which I live right on the border, so that's why I got a foot in both camps.
Yeah.
The other thing is my optimism. Is that I can never ever see this whole thing coming to fruition. We know they want to bring in digital IDs. We know they want to bring in central bank digital currency as a control mechanism,
Yeah.
and what have you. But now the numbers are building so much that in my optimistic world that I live in, as long as we get the numbers, this can never happen.
Well, that's
It's ludicrous.
That's got to be truth, hasn't it? That
Yeah.
if there are enough people saying no, it can't possibly
It's
happen.
finished.
Yeah. The other bit I see at the moment, which does make me optimistic, is that we are seeing people in, I've got to say, the professional classes who are now waking up. Many of them are not brave enough to speak out, but they will certainly speak to you off the record, and they've got concerns. It might be to do with vaccinations, or it might be to do with, it could be even the fact that we're losing pubs all over the place, and they see that this is the result of all these disastrous policies. So I think the word's spreading, and the fact we're now starting to see, and it is amazing, 15-minute city seems to have ignited something.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
The knock-on effect has been huge. There's a lot of videos now going on to platforms like YouTube,
Yeah.
where people are now fronting up to their councils and saying, right, what's going on? And we're not going to take this.
Yeah.
So it has sent ripples. It's sent ripples around the world.
Yeah. And the other bit that I like, I mean, we've been speaking to Sandy Adams, who's been doing all the work up in Glastonbury. So all these things are popping up, but the fact it's calm, people are doing it on an evidence base about what the real policies is. So it's calm and it's measured, and it's being taken directly into the democratic system via the councils. This to me is perfect, and I think it's going to produce a really strong effect amongst a lot of councillors. They're not bad people, but if they're getting a little bit of dosh, they're being paid their allowances and things, they can get a bit comfortable.
Yeah.
And they're happy turning up to meetings and doing the easy thing. But now they're going to be challenged, and I think that is going to make a lot of them think. And of course, the ones who decide that they're on board the wrong ship are going to jump ship, aren't they?
I think that what they need to be reminded of is that they're okay for now. Like you say, they're taking their wage and they're okay for now. But this will affect their kids, their grandchildren, and that their seat at the table and their ride on the gravy train will come to an end.
Yeah.
Historically, the powers that be have used the lower downs to get their agenda across. But as soon as that agenda is in place, they're disposed of.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's history.
That's the same for the politicians as well.
Yeah.
It makes me smile when I see the arrogant politicians who seem to believe that they're in the big boys club. But of course, the big boys club are the people who are ultimately controlling trillions of dollars. Those are the big boys, and the average MP is not in the bankers club. So I smile when I see this.
Yeah. Well, it's a big club, and you're not in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So Bob, some finishing words. I'm just going to say you got the whole of the UK column audience. We know that audience will be principally UK based, but we've also got a lot of people watching from wherever, whether it's Australia or New Zealand or the States or Germany. What's your message? What would you like people to do? What would you like people to do to make a difference? What would you like people to do to help what you've started?
It would be a simple message to realise that you are more powerful than you believe you are, and that although you're an individual, at some point, even poking your nose just that much above the parapet will make a difference. You don't have to be somebody that stands on a stage and voices and shares the information. You can be the person in the background that provides something. It doesn't matter how big that something is, but you're just as powerful as the person stood on the front of that stage. Because every little bit of resistance will help, every little bit of dissent will help. And if you just start saying, no, I'm not doing this, that's enough.
Yeah, that's utterly brilliant. Excellent. I think
Brilliant.
we'll leave it there. I'm going to shake your hand because it's been really great
It's been a pleasure.
to meet you. We've had a bit of a laugh about the studio and things. And I'm going to say on camera, I shared a secret with this gentleman
Yeah.
a few minutes before we started.
I promise I won't say anything.
You promised.
I promise.
I'm going to hold you to that. And the reason I'm smiling is we were talking about positive things for the UK column. So maybe we're now entering spring 2023 and something is beginning to change.
A turning point.
A turning point.
I've had a picture in my mind that
Yeah.
this will all be over and done with by 2025.
Okay, well I'll hold you to
Hope
that
so.
one because that would be brilliant. Yeah, great. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for everything you're doing, and well, we hope to see you again, and you can give us another update on Thetford. And
Well, I'll be back in July.
well, there you are then. Okay, brilliant.
Brilliant. Thanks
So
for your time.
Thank you. We'll leave it there for our audience. I hope you enjoyed that, and isn't it brilliant to know that people are out there doing stuff and we can see it making a difference. So we'll leave you to reflect on that on this lovely day. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
It was born from Thetford's stand in the park, where normal town folk have come together to unite as Thomas Paine independent candidates. Now let's meet them. We are not politicians. We are ordinary people like you who have had enough and want to bring some common sense to our council. We do not represent any political party. We only represent you, the people of Thetford. We will give our councillors' allowance back to the people of Thetford, held in a secure fund for those in need. We categorically oppose the war on motorists and 20-minute cities. We promise the people of Thetford a vote so you have your say on any proposed plans. Vote for your independent Thetford candidate.